Right, hello everyone. Well, this is all about the 6 obligatory plot events that you need for your story. So there are quite a large number of theories on plot and structure out there. But for our work at the moment with short stories, or if you want to work on a novel as well, these 6 obligatory plot points will serve you well with your story. So here's a quick definition of plot, and plot is the author's choice of events. So that's from Robert McKee, who's a really well-known screenwriter and lecturer and educator on story, and his book called Story is fantastic for this type of work. Now, plot is really closely connected with structure. The difference between plot and structure is that plot is about the events, whereas structure is the order of those events, the selection of how those events are ordered in the story. So the sequence that the audience receives those events is the structure. And the purpose of that structure is important as well. We order events and information in texts, whether they are fiction texts or non-fiction texts, because of the purpose of the author, whether that's to inform, persuade, or entertain, elicit emotions, present a worldview, for example. But for plot, for our purposes, we're focusing on the events, the choice of events. So the first plot point that you will want in your story is the exposition. And this essentially boils down to someone doing something somewhere. So we need to get who the main character or main characters are, what they're doing, and where they're doing it. And it's another way to think of it is it's the ordinary world of the protagonist. Because what's going to happen next is the inciting incident, and this is what kicks the story into motion. It's what throws the protagonist's world into chaos, and that's really the start point of the story. So if we think about Spider-Man, that's Spider-Man getting bitten by the spider. Right, progressive complications are what happens next. And these are where the protagonist tries and fails to restore order to their world or to achieve their goal. James Bond, for example, is very goal-focused. He gets his mission at the start of the film and he works towards achieving his mission throughout the film. And he'll try and fail and try and fail. There's complications thrown at him by the villain and he eventually succeeds. But these progressive complications are essentially cycles of trying and failing to restore order or trying and failing to defeat the villain of the story. Now, one key thing for progressive complications to make them really effective is that the protagonist's old strategies fail them. So, for example, say for example you have a really strong, physically strong person as your protagonist, and maybe they used to win by using their strength. So that's how they dealt with problems. But now they are, because their world has been thrown into chaos, they need to use their brains, and they haven't worked that out yet. They keep using their physical strength when actually they need to stop and think about things a little bit more. And it's when they figure this point out and they start doing it successfully, that's when we get to the crisis. Now, the crisis point is where the protagonist has to make a decision. Now, in a short story, often this crisis point is really, really short or embedded into the climax of the story. But here's some examples. The crisis point could be where the protagonist has to choose between fighting and running away. Maybe they have to use their brains or keep using their physical strength. They have to try one more time or they give up. They have to overcome their fear or give in to fear. So this crisis point is really important, but it's generally pretty small. Often this is the point where the try-fail cycle of the progressive complications ends, and their old strategy, for example, maybe their old strategy was just to run away from conflict. Now their new strategy is that they have to fight. Their old strategy was to use their physical strength. Their new strategy is to use their brains. Their old strategy was to give up and let other people win or dominate, and they end up losing all the time. Now they're going to try one more time and not give up. Or perhaps one of their character traits is that they're cowardly and they give in to fear. Now they're going to choose to overcome their fear. Now, this crisis moment, it depends a little bit on it depends a lot on the genre actually. If you are writing a tragedy where the story has a down ending, this crisis point will probably be where the character makes the wrong decision. They stay with their old strategy, or their character flaw dominates their decision. And we see this in a lot of Shakespearean and Greek tragedies. Macbeth, for example. Macbeth he gave in to his ambition, and after he kills King Duncan for the first time, he realizes he's guilty, and he realizes he's made a mistake and he's going to feel guilty, but he keeps doing it. He goes on and kills more people. He doesn't learn his lesson in the crisis moment, and there's a few crisis moments in Shakespeare's Macbeth. Macbeth doesn't learn. He continually makes the wrong choice. But if you're writing a happy ending story where the protagonist is victorious, then they will make that change. All right, moving on from crisis. Let's take a look at the climax. So traditionally, this is where the protagonist fights the villain and either wins or loses. So this is the moment of truth, so to speak. And this is the on the edge of your seat moment. This is where Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star successfully, or maybe doesn't. But it depends on the genre of story you're writing. If it's a action adventure story, then it's going to be the hero wins. If it's a tragedy, then the hero loses. If it's part of a bigger series that's being written, say for example some of the Marvel films that are spread over 2 or 3 films, then maybe there's a small win, but there's some really significant losses that come back in the next film that need to be resolved in the next film. Now, the key thing for the climax is that there is a major reversal. The story swings from positive to negative. So, for example, from life to death, or negative to positive, from death to life. Just as examples, these could be anything. So it could be for this positive to negative, for example, maybe the main character is in a relationship and lonely, not in a relationship, or the reverse if we're talking romance or comedy. Lonely, no relationship, to relationship. So again, depending on the genre and the values that are at stake in your story, there will be a wild swing from one to the other. In the example I was using with Macbeth, the climax moment of the whole play is Macbeth fighting Macduff, and there's a major reversal. Macbeth's story swings from life, he's alive, he's successfully killing other people, to death, and Macduff gets his revenge and kills Macbeth, and Macbeth dies. Now, the climax also has to have the largest emotional punch for the reader. This is really important. If the climax doesn't have some emotional punch, then it's an ineffective climax. And what I mean by emotional punch is that all the decisions of the protagonist, all the decisions of the antagonist have to collide together in that reversal, and we see that conflict play out. And then finally we have the resolution. One way to think about the resolution as a re-exposition. So again, we've got the protagonist, doing something. What are they doing now after they've won or lost? And what's the world like now that the big battle, so to speak, is over? So that could be on the interplanetary level, like Star Wars, or it could be just at the small emotional level if you're writing a relationship story, for example. We want to know what's happened after that final battle. Where are the characters now? What's the world like? Who's in a good place? Who's in not such a good place? If there's a lot of loose ends left untied, the story feels very unsatisfying. It's a chance to close any questions in subplots as well. So, for example, a lot of the action, thriller, adventure stories will also have a romance relationship subplot going on, where the protagonist teams up with a romantic interest, and as the story progresses they get closer and closer together. And so we want to know the answer to that question: do they actually get together or not? In short stories, sometimes, or often really, the resolution is very, very short. Again, it depends on the genre, but it can be as simple as 1 or 2 lines. There are times when some short story writers will leave the ending a little bit open, but you have to be really careful with that, because if there are too many open questions, then the reader will be really annoyed with the story. All right, so just to review, remember, plot is the author choosing which events to show the audience. You have to be very deliberate in your choice. If it's boring and doesn't add to the story, it doesn't belong in the story. All right, if you have any questions, please let me know. All right, bye.